So Lords of the Fallen 2023 is just released, and depending on where you look, it's either the best Souls-like in the world or the worst. Let's find out which one it is. Lords of the Fallen, a game that I was somewhat optimistic for, has just released to somewhat mixed reception. Obviously with Lords of the Fallen, it's just out now in October 2023, a sequel at this stage of the original game, which was created by Deck 13 back in 2014. That's right, the guys who made the Surge games, Surge 1 and 2, which were actually okay. Obviously the original Lords of the Fallen wasn't the best, but with the mixed reception in Lords of the Fallen, what I want to do is jump right in, get my impressions, and really actually find out, is the game any good? Is the game worth playing? I am obviously a big Souls fan. I love the From Software games, Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, 3, Bloodborne, Sekiro, fantastic, Demon Souls, and Elden Ring obviously is actually something that I have some problems personally with Elden Ring, which I may get into the video, may not, we'll see. But with this, no, I was excited for it. Obviously, it's running on the Unreal Engine 5 graphics engine, I should say, and it looks graphically insane. So it's up there with obviously Demon Souls in my eyes, or the PS5 remake that came out not so long ago. So yeah, a brief introduction on obviously Lords of the Fallen, a Souls-like, obviously a very known genre at this stage. We've gotten many Souls-likes that's came out the past few years. You know, like I mentioned, the Surge games, we've had Wolong, the Neo games, and obviously very recently Lies of P, which has, you know, garnered high critical reception. So yeah, in terms of this game, if you're not familiar with Souls-likes, you've got all the kind of trappings there. Loss of souls upon death, hard difficulty, and just kind of that From Software feel that I personally love. So the game is out on PS5, Series X and S, PC, and it's definitely not on Nintendo Switch. So there's a lot of problems at the moment. I think a lot of the problems that people are having at the moment is due to performance. So currently at the moment on Steam, it's got like a 5 or 6 out of 10, mainly due to the performance. Recently as well on the Series S and X, there was massive performance issues, and that was due to people getting a patch out on time, I believe. PlayStation didn't have this issue. I believe the PlayStation process in terms of getting patches out to the system is much quicker than on Xbox, but I do believe they had a patch recently, but performance there is still a bit ropey. So if you are deciding to buy the game, maybe wait just a wee bit if you're on PC or Xbox. So I'm playing on PS5, and one of the things that I want to say is I've played on both an OLED TV with VRR and also a 4K TV HDR but no VRR, and the differences on both do change. But let's get into it. So is it actually any good? Because that's what I want to dive into. So setting up the story, first and foremost, I'm not too big into the story in these games. Generally speaking, with Dark Souls 1, Fat Vid, you got me covered there. But in terms of the actual game, it's not something I play these games for. I'm just all about the gameplay. But the story here is actually quite in front of you, you know, front and center. So you got a good kind of intro as soon as you're starting the game. Seems to be characters throughout the game that obviously give you a bit more lore, and then throughout the game when you're going into what I'll get into in just a second, the umbral realm, there is story there as well. That's where it gets a bit unique. It's a bit different than your typical Souls-like game. Basically what you'll have is an umbral light. I'm probably saying that wrong. I should probably specify I'm about 3 to 4 hours in. This is extremely early impressions, but you will have an umbral light which basically will bring in a second dimension that you can go into at any stage. So this is where it's quite interesting, and it does show Unreal Engine 5 flexing its muscles. So it renders both instances at once. So by pressing the L2 button or the left trigger on an Xbox remote, what you're actually getting to see is a pathway into another realm that even upon death, what happens is you then go into that realm as kind of a second life to try and stay alive, taking what you can from, think about Sekiro's resurrection ability, that when you die, you know, you have another chance. So yeah, that's kind of what the main thing is, the main difference here from not just a normal Souls. Like, you've got that kind of that second dimension that it's good for puzzling, it's good for puzzles, it's good for a lot of different things that you wouldn't have expected in the game. Traversal, a few wee, you know, twists and turns. Personally, I don't usually like that in games, I'll be honest. Once I seen this, I kind of went, ugh. But the further I played, you know, the less I was annoyed about it, and it started kind of adding that cool different layer, and I know that a lot of people are happy with it and the things that it does later on in the game. So I'm excited to see what that's like. These games thrive on the combat. If the combat isn't very good, you're screwed, and that's in my opinion. So in terms of a Souls-like needs to feel a certain way, and I know a lot of people loved Lies of P, myself included. I like the exploration, the shortcuts, the world design. The one thing that I feel that this nails for me is the weightiness of combat. So you have haptics, you know, in terms of when you're attacking the enemy, you get that haptic feedback on the PlayStation DualSense controller, which is absolutely critical for me personally to kind of give me that feedback on the game itself, so I know what I'm hitting. And I know that's not something that, you know, really was kind of front and center with Lies of P. A lot of the problems that I had there was when I was using the rapier on a kind of a dex build, or a technical, I think it was, or technique build. You didn't get that feedback as well. So I feel here with the combat, they've nailed it. Although it isn't perfect. Definitely not perfect. So you've got a fast run as well, which is very strange in a Souls-like game, but it's a welcome addition. I know the worlds are quite big. So in terms of getting about, you know, having that to run around and kind of traverse quickly is a welcome, in my opinion. Other than that, you kind of got your standard setup. You've got a shield in one hand, you have a sword in another. And what you also have now, which I do really like, is projectiles that respawn upon rest. So almost like little bombs that you can throw, or grenades. When you respawn, you get a brand new resource to use. So if you're using an enemy, especially talking about the first boss that I fought, or the second in this case, she uses uses distance to her advantage, but using this kind of mechanic, what that allowed me to do is actually attack her from afar. And that there's obviously pouches in the game as well that lets you regain ammunition whilst you play. So I thought that was actually very, very good, and it does kind of add another layer onto the combat. And talking about the combat, you've obviously got the FromSoft kind of games kind of taking inspiration from them. So like I said, with the Sekiro, you know, the resurrection mechanic with the umbral world. Not only that, you've gotten the Bloodborne dodge here, which is fantastic. So you would press B or O for one kind of a dodge, which has pretty good iframes. Double tap for an O, as in your Souls-like kind of normal kind of rolling there. And then you also have a very good feeling parry, like your Sekiro. Also with that, if you block any attacks, you'll take, I believe the word's like deflect damage or something like that, flinch damage, whatever. But it's like Bloodborne, a game where you can be defensive, but then what that'll do is it'll allow you to take damage but regain that health that you just lost back throughout the game, or throughout the fight, I should say. Graphically is obviously very, very impressive, and that's not something that I'm too fussed on in these games, but it literally can go head to head with Demon Souls on the PS5, which to me is probably the best next gen looking game. I am very early days, but there are scenes in this game that are absolutely outstanding. And in terms of the world design, and I know this is something that people mention later on in the game with the world kind of interlinking and really being a massive, massive focus, that's personally something that makes me love Dark Souls 1. You know, that world of Lodran completely interwoven. That's supposedly what we get with this game later on as well. So everywhere that you can see, you can supposedly go to some aspect, or it's places that you will visit. So I actually have seen throughout the game, there's like red kind of markers on the map that are beaming to the sky. And I'm guessing that's places that we'll go. So you'll get that feedback of looking into the distance in the future, and that's places that you've been before. So I'm really excited to kind of see what they do with that. Build is another one. You know, at the moment, you've got all your regular trappings, so you can go for different types of build. You can go strength, you can go kind of a dex build, which I believe is agility here. You have your magic and so on. And like obviously the likes of Elden Ring or Dark Souls, you can kind of have your different armors as well. So you can kind of have different layers of builds that I believe obviously with Lies of P, the way that was doing it, you had kind of your rings as you will. It wasn't as kind of in-depth as Fashion Souls like this could be. The difficulty is something I think needs addressed. This game, for me personally, I would consider myself decent at FromSoft games. I got my fucking ass kicked for about 1 hour 30 minutes on the second boss. I don't think the minute-to-minute enemies are a walkover, which is something I felt in Lies of P really did suffer from, where enemies were just completely staggerable. It was, you know, the main bosses that were giving you some trouble. But with this, it's kind of a mixture. You know, you can obviously get overwhelmed easy with normal enemies, but not too much. But those bosses are, you know, they can be challenging. So that's second boss that I'd fought. 1 hour 30 of getting it down. And once you kind of realize about when to dodge with a certain boss, what their moveset is, when to parry, all that information, what will basically start to happen is you just master that complete boss, which I haven't really had in much games apart from Sekiro, where you know the whole entire moveset, you know what to do next. And that is obviously something that happens in other FromSoft games. It's not unique to Sekiro, but it's just obviously something that I felt was missing from Liza P, which obviously there was a moveset there, but it almost just felt a bit too random in a sense. Yeah, so I'm really interested to see where it goes. You know, like I said, 4 hours deep at the moment. Nothing, you know, it's a step in the puddle in the grand scheme of things, but I am really enjoying the game, and I'm really surprised because it's not something that I was willing to go out and just spend £60 on, you know, willy-nilly. I did do a bit of research, and I went on the Reddit page, and a lot of people were actually very optimistic, but others were telling people to avoid the game like the plague. But I think in the grand scheme of things that there is a great game here. Should it have probably been delayed? Absolutely. I don't think any game should be released in this day and age with performance issues. I think that should be ironed out at the very least. Bugs are bugs, you're always going to get them. But I believe here there is a game that could honestly be up there as the best Souls-like personally at the moment, because it does feel very much like Dark Souls 2 to myself, with a mixture of Demon Souls in there. So I am enjoying it. I'm looking forward to seeing what can come from it. But absolutely, if you're on the fence and you're thinking, you know what, I have a PS5, give it a go. If you are a FromSoft fan or you like Souls games, definitely give it a go. A few of the reviews, you know, they were complaining about, a lack of identity. And personally with me, Souls-like is a genre. It's like a Metroidvania. They all have a through line that they stick to. They're all going to feel somewhat similar in that sense. You can mix it up. But with this, I feel like Hexworks, the guys who made this one, rather than Deck 13, have absolutely nailed it. Maybe they should have been given more time, absolutely. But I think if you are on the fence and you have the money sitting there and you're thinking, should I or shouldn't I? If you have a PS5, do it. If you have a PC or an Xbox, maybe give it a few weeks or if not months. But absolutely, I would recommend, from my early impressions, it is definitely worth giving a blast.